Welcome to Her Wealth Unscripted. We're your hosts, Susan Jones
and Sarah Gilsheimer. We believe financial decisions are most powerful when they're made with intention and grounded in what matters most to you.
This is a space for real conversations about money, life, and the moments that change everything.
Because it's more than numbers, it's the life they make possible.
You mentioned a lot of things that are really important to think about in terms of your role in inheriting. So can you talk a little bit more about the tax implications of the different types of assets you might inherit and maybe some different ways to think about what you should do with those?
Yeah. So, the first thing is to keep in mind that there's a big difference between taxable assets that aren't retirement account assets versus retirement account assets. And so things like taxable investment accounts, your ownership interest in real estate, even things like your car or different things. So anything that you own kind of individually is going to get what's called a basis adjustment. And I'm saying it that way because oftentimes, as I just almost did, we call it a step up in basis because we assume that there's been appreciation since the person who passed away purchased it. And so then it essentially gets marked to market on their date of death. But that is also the case that people sometimes forget is if there's been a market decline. And so for anyone who's, been doing this for a while, you have had those clients who unfortunately passed away at a time where there had been a significant dip. And then all of a sudden the new value is less. But for the most part, there's going to be a step up in basis. And so what that means is that if you've had things like concentrated stock positions or other assets that maybe you've held onto because of the unrealized gain, that gain is going to go away. And so it's important to, for a lot of reasons, just make sure that you understand what those assets are and that you have a good record of that. So certainly if you're working with us, that's something we're going to help with. But again, even for things like real estate, because those records can be hard to go back later on and figure out. Retirement accounts are different. And so anything that's in an IRA, if it's a Roth, we don't care. But for a pre-tax IRA, it's important to remember that that doesn't get a step up in basis. And so essentially it's going to continue to come out as ordinary income for the beneficiary. And one thing, Sarah, that we both know is that because of the Secure Act, what used to be a really nice tax benefit of being able to stretch those RMDs for beneficiaries over their own life expectancy is now for the most part gone. And so now there's a 10-year window instead for non-spouse beneficiaries. And so later on, when the beneficiaries are doing their own planning, that's going to be really integral to keep in mind. And then the other thing I would say, again, if someone's already done estate planning, it's good to remember that if there's been an irrevocable trust that was set up with assets that were gifted, generally those assets are not going to get a basis adjustment. And so often one of the planning opportunities that we're doing for clients is to the extent there's assets with a lot of appreciation in an irrevocable trust, and they have assets that have a higher basis outside of that irrevocable trust. Oftentimes, if there's a swap power, we can swap those out in order to make sure that we get kind of the most, we really optimize that basis adjustment.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, pausing, giving yourself grace, understanding what you've inherited, what role you have in that. And in terms of the tax implications, as you noted, so if you've inherited an account that had, Meta stock that you purchased many, many years ago and has appreciated significantly in basis now. So this could be a really good opportunity for someone to diversify away from those concentrated stock positions. What other types of strategies should they be thinking about in terms of, integrating them into their current financial plan?
Yeah. So again, I think that's the first thing is to make sure you understand the basis. And then if there's something that you've been waiting to do or wanting to do, but haven't been able to because of that unrealized gain, to really take another look. And again, back to that fiduciary duty, if you do have, a lot of Bitcoin that you haven't wanted to get rid of because of the unrealized gain, go ahead and, really consider diversifying, because not only could it help you, but it could also keep you from legal troubles in case there's a market decline after death. But then I think, when we think about how, the best way to take money to live on. It's really looking at the tax impact. And so understanding where your buckets are. And so kind of building into your own what you have and, what you've been kind of living off yourself, and then thinking through, okay, how can I optimize that in a way, pulling from those different buckets. I also think, if you live in a state that is a separate property state, oftentimes inherited assets are considered separate property as long as you keep them separate and you don't commingle. And so certainly, that's not always a fun topic to talk about, is divorce or something that could happen. But for, anyone who is married and doesn't have a prenup that stipulates anything about inherited assets, or even as a practical matter, it's hard to go back and trace once you've put that into a joint account. So I would say too, because that's something that sometimes we see, is that, again, when there's an estate that's being administered, a beneficiary, it's time to give a payout, and someone says, oh, just go ahead and put it into my joint account, not thinking that just that one action could actually hurt them later on if there is a dissolution of their own marriage.